Tonight's topic is Portraits of Courage, Part 2, and our host, Frank Russo.
Good evening. When the topic of homosexuality arises, it's often dealt with in one of two ways: complete acceptance of relationships that involve homosexual activity, or complete aversion not only towards the homosexual activity, but also towards the homosexual person. Both responses seem to presume that homosexual activity is a given in the life of a person with same-sex attraction. Unknown to many, there is an entire community of men and women who experience same-sex attraction, but who strive to avoid homosexual activity and live a chaste life in accord with God's law. These are the men and women of courage. Most keep their struggles private and only reveal what's in their hearts in the safety of a courage meeting. But some courage members have decided to step forward and face the cameras for the video you are about to see. We hope you'll be touched by their stories. And now, our video.
They have experienced many of the same childhood struggles that you have, so there is a bond there.
Always better to have at least one other person that you can tell this to.
I just couldn't believe I could live without a relationship.
I was praying wrong, and the prayer needed to be, Father, please show me the meaning of these desires.
After these experiences continued, there was still a gnawing sense in my heart. Something is not right. Well, there's been enormous media propaganda to try to convince Americans and those in the world that there is a gay gene. Hammer did research a number of years ago. It's highly touted research. It's very significant, extremely significant, that no one has replicated that research. The largest research study done of male homosexuals, brothers in Canada, reported in Science several years ago, there was no gene marker at all. This is very unusual in science. If someone reports something, it's almost always you can find it replicated. So there's some significant question about the validity of the Hammer study. It has not been repeated. There's been no study proving that there is a gay gene. There are decades of research demonstrating, clinical articles demonstrating that there are certain emotional conflicts within the family and within peer relationships that set the stage and set that into motion. Many people are very surprised by what they find as they begin an inward journey. They're surprised because we deny our emotional pain through our intellect. The major origins of homosexual attractions in females are the result first of a mistrust of male love, that is a certain fear of becoming vulnerable, of giving oneself, of surrendering to male love. The origins of that tend to be trauma in the father relationship is the most common. Secondly, trauma in peer relationships, especially dating relationships in this culture which is so sexualized and narcissistic. And the other cause is weak feminine identity. This comes from not having enough nurturing female love. The major origins of homosexual attractions in males differ from those in females. In males, the most common origin is a weak masculine identity that is never developing a positive sense of one's masculinity. This is the result of a distant father relationship, never being affirmed or comforted in father love. But the most common cause that I've dealt with over 25 years is a result of peer rejection. So these little boys begin to feel isolated, alone, and rejected. They begin to relate basically to females, or identify with the feminine rather than the masculine. The other causes of weak masculine identity are a poor body image and also the result of being sexually traumatized by other males in childhood. The next most common cause of male homosexuality are mistrust of female love. What we see today are many young males. Fathers have left the family through divorce. The oldest boy is in a relationship where his mother is overly dependent upon him. So by the time he becomes 12 or 13, he views female love not as fun or enjoyable, but as a heavy burden. He begins to withdraw from female love. It's oppressive to him. Other males have mothers who may be controlling, overly angry, so they're afraid of trusting in female love. My goal is not to change anyone, but to address emotional pain. It's very difficult to help people overcome the emotional pain leading to same-sex attractions unless they have support.
It's much easier to be chaste when you're part of a support group, all of whose members agree with you, have the same ideals, the same beliefs of faith, are willing to work together to help each other out.
People believed naively that simply psychotherapy could heal, for example, cure alcoholism. We've learned that doesn't work. Once they brought in the AA 12-step approach with spirituality, then alcoholism really began to be treated significantly. And I think the same thing happens in the 12-step meetings of courage, that you have this wonderful fellowship, a brother supported by a brother is like a fortified city, so you have this encouragement, this support. It's wonderful, this male bonding, or female bonding as it might be. It's very, very helpful.
Our position on reparative therapy is simply that we welcome it for those who want to seek it. And we hope to have more empirical studies which will show better ways of going about it. But meanwhile, we're not in the business of therapy. We're in the business of spiritual direction.
Courage is not basically a psychotherapeutic group. Even people say it's really a form of psychotherapy. It really isn't that. It really is a spiritual help. Father Harvey designed it as a way of helping people use God's grace, either to contain this self-destructive behavior or else to develop into a further level of psychosexual functioning.
Probably the most consistent thing about my life is activism itself. My first act as a gay activist was to write an essay arguing against the Christian position on homosexuality, and recently I wrote a book, Beyond Gay, that defended the Christian position. AIDS began to be a factor. I started burying people, and I've buried 18 people. That's too many. At age 19 or so, I tried to kill myself, and I attempted to drive my Pinto into a tree. And in the wake of that was the first time I told another human being that I thought that I might be homosexual. And I just found myself telling him all this stuff, and he looked over his shoulder at me and said, "Why don't you pray about it?" And I thought, oh, geez, nobody prays anymore. What a stupid idea. And I was kind of ticked at him because I felt that he wasn't taking me seriously, and I had been trying to be serious. But he kind of planted a seed. The following spring, I was in the shower. It was very quiet, and a little voice popped in my head. Said, but you could pray now. And I'm all right, Father. So I just stepped in the shower, and I wrapped the towel around me, and I stalked into the bedroom on my knees, hands on the covers, like this, you know? And I had the classic skeptic's prayer. Lord, I don't even know if you exist. But if you exist, I sure need you in my life. And he came. And I went and bought the Bible, and I brought it home. Knelt down by the bed. Okay, Lord, what do you feel about this? Open it up. Just random, you know. This Bible literally at this point has never been opened before since it left the factory. Okay. Open it up, and what is it open to? But Genesis 19, the story of Sodom and Gomorrah. Slam the book shut, because I wasn't ready to hear that. Because I thought that if I stopped having sex with my partner, then he would leave. And I wasn't ready for that at all. So I fell into gay theology. I found my first church out of the phone book, an Anglican church. There I met Christians who knew why they were Christians, knew who Jesus was, knew that homosexual activity was wrong, didn't approve of the way I lived my life, but were willing to love me nonetheless. Lord, okay, if you want me to be chaste, I'll try to be chaste, but you got to help me. You got to help me explain this to people, to my partner who loved me, remember? So I went to him and said, I love you. Can we please stop? In the end, a sterling friendship has come out of it, because we love each other more now than we ever did when we were having sex.
When I was 5 years old, I was sexually abused by a so-called friend of the family. We called him Uncle Pete. He was everything my dad couldn't be. He spent time with me, he listened to me, he shared with me, and he held me. And then one night, he came into my bed, and I was sexually abused. Well, I was told an old wives' tale, which is completely false. People said, Richard, find a good woman and she'll straighten you out. You know, just serve the Lord and study the Word, and He'll take it all away. I did all of those things. I was celibate for 9 years before marrying my wife. And then we got married, and I told her about what I thought was my past. And then after we got married, those desires came back in technicolor. I was in so much emotional pain, so I needed mentors. I needed men to spend time with me. And I went to several ministries, I went to several churches, and I said, please, please, be with me. And no one could do it. So it began a very horrible time of my life. I went back into the sad gay world. And at least I was an honest sinner. I told my wife what I was doing, and I said, please don't divorce me. And I went back to the deepest painful part of being abused. And what came out of me was, it's all my fault. And then I needed lots of mentoring. I had to do makeup work because I was developmentally delayed. So I needed lots of guys in my life. And so I started finding men to mentor me in different aspects, athletically and socially. And I said, Dad, do you ever think I wanted to have sex with a man? I was looking for you in their arms, and you've never held me. And even though I think he was 72 at the time, and I was 37, I said, you're going to hold me now. And I jumped on his lap. My rigid, militaristic, Marine, grew up in military school father. So his arms were like this, so I took one arm and I went like that, and I took the other arm and I went like that. And he held me, and I started to cry, and he can't stand crying because he has so many frozen tears himself. And I said, you're going to hold me now, as a father would hold his little boy, and I'm going to grieve the losses of my past, all the things you and I never got to do. So you're just going to be quiet, and you're going to let me cry. And I don't need you to do anything else, Dad, but hold me. And I did it for 1 hour. It was like eternity. And I cried and cried as my daddy held me in his arms. And we bonded for the first time. And he felt so happy afterwards because he felt like a dad, which I know he always wanted to. He just didn't know how to do it. And my wife and I have a great relationship. And I love my kids a lot. So I'm a real blessed man now. I'm so grateful to be awake and not asleep or numb.
Well, eventually I got more sucked into the gay lifestyle. Well, I had left the Catholic Church, going out to gay clubs and gay bars, and sort of almost kind of making up for the fun I didn't have when I was younger. I think I was hopeful that it would be a positive experience. What I found out eventually was it wasn't making me happy, that I was a slave to this passion, and this expression of my life was getting more and more out of control. And I was also very aware that in the gay lifestyle, you just would not find very many men who had committed relationships with say, another man. Was having so much difficulty at the time. I had just moved, and I was acting out this lifestyle almost as a release from that stress that I was having as well. So I started picking up the rosary, and I was praying it, and I just remember praying it, saying to myself that, I don't really care what the Catholic Church says, but I know this is something that the Church can't take away from me. It led for me to have that, I guess maybe that desire or that conversion of heart to look at the Catholic Church again, and to go to confession. And I think what made me angry once I found out that there was such an organization as Courage was, I think I was angry. I just didn't know about it growing up. And I think many people get different things out of Courage. There are some people who are looking, hopefully someday, to reorient themselves to a heterosexual lifestyle. I think many people can become too focused on it, where they'll try to do things, they'll try to do more manly things, they'll try to, as if it's something that they can fix themselves. And then there are some who just want to, which would be the majority, who would just want to have control of their lives and want that that peace and satisfaction of knowing that they're walking their walk with God. I always wanted to keep my focus on God, and if God wanted to reorient myself, I was open to it. And I think as I've grown in my walk with God, I think I've experienced also a journey of inner healing. The more I've gotten to know who Jesus is and accepted him as really the Lord of my life, the more I was able to be open to whatever graces God wanted for me. God can do in an instant what therapy can do in 20 years. I've been noticing more and more that I am more attracted to women, but there is a part of me that is grateful that I've had this struggle. It has made me that much more prayerful, and I don't think I would have had the relationship I have with God that I do now if I didn't have to go through this.
My son had struggled for some time with other problems. We didn't understand what the underlying real problem was.
At 18, he had run away from a drug treatment program and had come home, and he was rather broken. After that, he shared that he had been sexually abused when he was about 5 years old.
Well, we felt grief for him, and especially that we had not been there for him and understood how to respond to what had happened.
Our son shared that he was struggling with same-sex attraction. That was a very difficult moment for me. I said, gee, what did I do? Was it my fault? And that's focusing more on me than on the issue. The other is, how can I fix you? And that didn't work very well either. In fact, we had to really back up a lot from the first approaches that we took with our son because they weren't working. He, in fact, said, this is who I am, this is what I am, and I don't want to be fixed.
At that time, I felt terrible guilt.
And I was able to connect with the older brother a lot easier than I could connect with our younger son, who was more artistically oriented.
No one in the church could tell me of any place I could go. My hunger was to be with other Catholics who had maybe similar difficulties, other Catholic parents. There was an article about Father Harvey. I read the article and I thought, oh, finally, there's something for Catholics.
Got in touch with Courage and encouragement. It was like a breath of fresh air just coming in.
I think Encourage is very important because it helps parents understand that they can learn to change themselves to be there for that person.
Courage was so enriching and enlivening. It enlivened us. It brought us to an understanding and brought some peace into our life.
We need to hear from the priests the truth about homosexuality. And if we heard that message, I think we would learn in the process how to respond in love.
As we came to our first Courage conference, we went home so high and so full of joy from that it was amazing.
My experience of reaching out to other parents heals me, and I hope that it brings them hope and healing too.
As a father, I made mistakes with my son. I didn't love him in the way that I needed to love him. And this is probably the hardest thing for me as a father to deal with, is acknowledging the areas of failure that I had with my son, to beg his forgiveness.
And I love my son more than I ever have.
That's my hope and my prayer for my son, that he discover that truth, which is being taught by the church and being held out by the church as a gift to all of us who struggle with issues of sin in our life. Not just sins dealing with same-sex attraction, but any sin. And to be able to come home to that and to embrace that truth is a joyful event, and I'm looking forward to that time when my son comes home.
Catholic laity have got to get up to speed on this issue.
It's a detachment from one's gender identity, and they're seeking in another person what they lack within themselves. And then we call these people names, and we put them at bay. The healing is they need to be embraced.
I was feeling very alone with these feelings. I think encouraged me or prompted me to reach out to these to that lifestyle.
Because actually I learned the desire was trying to tell me. Here I kept trying to flagellate myself all these years. Get out of me, get out of me. But actually, that was the message from my soul saying, heal me, heal me. That's why it's so terrible to tell men and women if they have same-sex attractions that you're evil and bad. It's killing the most precious part of them.
We don't have the time. HIV rates and syphilis rates are spiking up again. Imagine people wandering around the landscape looking for water where there is no water. When they come to us and ask, we've got to have it. Because we don't know how many chances we've got. We don't know how much time the Holy Spirit has spent with someone's soul, getting it to the point where they can ask that question, where they can't have the door slammed on them, and they've got to find love there, and they've got to find Christ in us.
When we tried to share the ministry of courage with some members of the diocese, we ran into people who worked in opposition to the establishment of the ministry.
And they're very adamant about it. They interrupt meetings. They do things that they truly believe are right. I'm sure they do.
You know, what was really perhaps going on was to try to undermine what courage had to teach, and basically what the church had to say.
It grieves me because people are hurting terribly.
Anybody from the church who's watching this, you know, I was with Kurt because you weren't with me. So if you want to get judgmental, look in the mirror. I need somebody who will show me the way of guys and throw a ball with me and put your arm around me and listen to my pain, listen to my joy. I need somebody in Jesus' shoes saying, Richard, I love you. And it was so difficult to find anyone.
I said, thank you, Father, Holy Father, for what you've done for us. And thank you especially for courage. And he stopped and he looked at me. And he looked right in my eyes and he said, courage is doing the work of God. That was when it was made really clear to me, and I think the courage, that the Holy Father knows what we're up against and is definitely cheering for us.
I was going to say, the way I'm feeling now, I say, oh God, if I could have felt like this at 15. You know, if I really could have had this feeling and this knowingness now. I mean, I guess, you know, with age does come wisdom, so it's part of the journey. If I would have known this my whole life, because it's a complete joy, it's very, very peaceful.
Chastity is where, you know, we could meet God within ourselves and meet ourselves.
Chastity is happiness. Being unchaste is restless and unhappy. It's true that unchastity is really what is unhappy.
They've experienced and are experiencing what you're experiencing, so you don't feel alone.
There's something very special about a chaste friendship that is probably as satisfying as what I would imagine two married people would feel like. It is that deep. And I only know that because I've heard married people say to me, I see when you're with people from Courage, is the way you share with one another, the way the giving, the selflessness there, and it's truly, you know, it's really quite a gift.
I find that the fellowship of Courage has changed my life.
I've just really found that the people I've met in Courage are really people of just high character who don't want to give in to this, what the Pope calls this culture of death.
To learn more about the condition of homosexuality, read Father John Harvey's The Truth About Homosexuality, The Cry of the Faithful. To read about the journey of one Courage member, read David Morrison's Beyond Gay. For a look at proactive parenting, read Don Schmirer, An Ounce of Prevention. A wealth of information, contacts, and support await you at Courage.
We hope you were moved by this video on the Courage organization. In a moment, we'll tell you how to contact them. On a personal note, Bob, my best friend of 20 years, lived a hidden life as a homosexual. In 1983, Bob repented and went to confession. A few months later, in 1984, Bob was one of the first 5,000 to die of AIDS. Unfortunately, Bob didn't get the opportunity to join a Courage group. If he had, Bob would be alive today. Thanks for joining us.
When's Daddy coming home? Soon.
Other news, negotiations broke down again.
Daddy! Daddy! Jared! Jared, wait!
You got me.
So how was work?
Brutal. One meeting after another. I got a ton to do tonight.
At the end of the day, when the weight of the world is upon you,
His daddy doesn't want to play. Hey!
isn't it amazing
All right.
how the weight of their love can lift you up again?
Hey, you guys coming to dinner? Hey, guys.
For a free brochure about rediscovering the joy of your children, call 1-800-A-FAMILY and focus on the family.
My hero hasn't traveled the world. Doesn't star on her own TV show. Can't sing very well. My hero didn't plan on being pregnant. Put her career on hold. Chose to have and love me. My hero, my mom.
If you're facing an unplanned pregnancy, learn more today about parenting or adoption. While there are unwanted pregnancies, there are no unwanted children.
The program has been brought to you by the American Family Association of New York. You can contact Courage at St. John the Baptist Church, 210 West 31st Street, New York, New York, 10001, at 212-268-1010. If you would like to receive AFA's free quarterly newsletter, just call or write us with your name and address. You may contact the AFA by writing us at P.O. Box 203, Port Washington, New York, 11050, or calling us at 516-944-3544. You can also read our newsletter and see our TV schedule by visiting our website at www.afany.org. Your comments are welcome. Thanks for being with us.